Welcome to a new look, a new format, Brexit Business Show, coming to you now in full colour video. We aim to liven up Brexit and bring it out of its doldrums, warts and all. In today's show, Hugh Morgan-Williams brings you his acclaimed digest Hugh's News, the things you need to know. Then Hugh and myself will have a news chat about a topical item from the news, which, hint, this episode could be a bit inflationary. My Malcolm's Monologue will give you some practical guidance on selling in these tough times. Now, I reckon I'll be covering a lot of that over the next year or so. Following that comes our brand new feature called Vision On, where we take a country each episode and talk about the business opportunities and challenges in that country. This episode, it's Vision On India. Our final segment is, as in all our Brexit Bid Show, our editorial comment called Hugh's View. Always to the point. Let's see what he's feeling like this episode. But let's get this show started.
This week, Liz Truss launches a dispute resolution process with the EU to try and access science programmes. Michael Gove is harangued at a Greek airport over a 35-hour EasyJet delay. It's confirmed the number of visas granted to EU citizens has plunged, and the Royal Navy says it's handing back to Border Force the role of policing migrants. Britain has launched dispute resolution proceedings with the EU to try and gain access to the bloc's scientific research programmes, including the big one, Horizon Europe. Under the trade agreement signed in 2020, Britain negotiated access to a range of science and innovation programmes, including Horizon, a €95 billion programme that manages grants and research projects for scientists. But 18 months on, Britain says the EU has yet to finalise access to Horizon or Copernicus, the Earth observation programme on climate change, or Euratom, the nuclear research programme, and to services such as space surveillance and tracking. Both sides are saying cooperation in research is mutually beneficial, but relations have soured over trade with Northern Ireland, which has prompted Europe to start legal proceedings over the UK's refusal to implement parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol. These legal proceedings started in June. Liz Truss yesterday in a statement accused the EU of being in clear breach of the agreement, seeking to prioritise access to these programmes vital to our scientific community. The European Commission says it's taken note of Britain's announcement. Michael Gove must have wished he had chosen a different Greek airport to fly back to Gatwick after he was accosted by a former Labour councillor to complain about her 35-hour flight delay with EasyJet, which she said the airline had blamed staff shortages because of the pandemic and Brexit. Mr. Gove denied it was due to Brexit, but the animated conversation continued for some 15 minutes before Mr. Gove said it was an inappropriate time and place to discuss it since he was on holiday. A report out this week shows that the number of EU citizens moving to the UK has plunged post-Brexit, not surprisingly. Data shows that just 43,000 EU citizens received visas for work, family, study, or other purposes in 2021. The dramatic decline has hit hospitality and support services hard, as well, of course, as the farming sector. The Royal Navy has sparked consternation in the Home Office with the news that it's handing back control of Channel migrant operations to Border Force in January, citing insufficient staff or resources to be able to do the job long term. The admirals apparently believe their resources will be needed to support the war in Ukraine, along with its other traditional defence roles. Expect several rounds of heavyweight exchanges before January.
Thanks, Hugh. And now it's time for our news chat. Let's talk about inflation, possibly the biggest worry for many business leaders and a beast to control. By the way, I was just reflecting upon your Michael Gove comment in your news there about saying he was on holiday. If you're running a business, you're never on holiday, are you? So why does he think he's so special? But never mind. What's your thinking on inflation? Is it dangerous? And are there benefits possibly of falling pound helping exporters?
Well, certainly a falling pound will help exporters, but there are other things that inflation does, which makes it very difficult to trade. For example, customers abroad want certainty on pricing. How can you be certain on pricing when your raw material costs are shooting up and you really don't know what the end price to the customer is going to be? So that's a bit of a problem too. Yes, in terms of pricing, you do get a temporary benefit from a decline in the value of the pound, and you do get a benefit from inflation, but it is temporary. And the one problem that people will be facing is how they can keep their businesses going profitably without increasing prices to a point where the competition wins. So there are a number of really difficult issues. And I do find it interesting with the two Conservative leadership candidates. One talks about nothing but inflation, Rishi Sunak, and Liz Truss ignores it. And whether that is to do with their respective knowledge of economics, I really can't tell.
I think it's causing a lot of businesses leaders, though, a big worry. Now, you mentioned hospitality beforehand, and it's now reckoned that 1 in 3 hospitality businesses will go bust this year. 1 in 3. And of course, it just keeps escalating. And today there's news out saying that, look, leaders, don't think that the supply chain issues are going to heal by the end of 2022, as most people seem to think. They're going to continue and continue and continue. That's worrying as well, isn't it?
It is. And I think also, hospitality bosses are increasingly more determined to come out and speak about the problems they face. I mean, there was a pub owner on the BBC News this week who has a very fancy restaurant in Oxfordshire. He says he can only open 2 days a week because he can't staff it the rest of the time. And that's a huge worry for them. And also, you know, the price of salmon going up by 80%. It just means that salmon's going to be off the menu in a lot of restaurants because people won't be prepared to pay the prices to eat it. So hospitality bosses have got huge concerns about how they can continue to run their businesses, attract customers willing to pay their prices, and of course, manage the huge problem of energy. I think a lot of people forget that businesses do not have a price cap. And so energy providers are whacking businesses with basically what is the standard price for energy, which is a lot higher than we as consumers are paying because we're protected by the price cap. We might not think we're being protected by the forecast price increases, you know, £3,200 in October and over £4,000 in January. But imagine what it means for business. There was one person I heard that their electricity bill had gone up 5 times since this time last year. Well, you can't have that kind of price increase and not having it reflected in increasing prices and therefore increasing inflation. And again, that has a huge impact on companies that export because they just do not know what they're going to have to charge. And it's made worse by our main European competitors not paying nearly as much for energy because their governments have taken action to protect them. Our government hasn't.
It's very worrying. I'm starting to get together the furniture ready to burn for in the winter to keep warm. Thanks, Hugh. And now for my pre-recorded Malcolm's monologue. In a tough market, positivity will win. I'm Malcolm Gallagher. I don't need to tell you that the future's looking gloomy with IRE, that's inflation, recession and economy, looming over us. Meeting sales goals is rarely easy. Even in the good times, no one ever beats a path to your door. And now it's getting harder. For people who sell in a bidding market, it's a new ballgame. Bid lists that used to have 3 or 4 healthy competitors on them suddenly have 15 or 20. So what do you do? Well, coming up are 8 suggestions that may help. Determined to succeed. Number 1. One problem in business is our confusion between decision making and problem solving. So don't just lower your goals and blame it on the economy. Be a leader, be a problem solver, clarify the obstacles, find creative solutions and take appropriate action. It's been said, the surest way not to fail is to determine to succeed. Number 2, put everybody in sales. Okay, so your accounts person would rather jump in front of a train than call an old customer and ask for an order. But you can help. First, be sure that anyone that's reluctant knows why they're doing it. For example, to save their job. Then show him or her what to do. Call, say, 5 past customers a day. And how to do it. Ask them what they need and what you can do to increase your business volume. Then be sure to reward them vigorously, verbal praise at a minimum, and some sort of performance bonus at a maximum. And last, remember how hard it was when you first got into sales? Number 3, never lose a customer. The old rule that it costs 5 times more to get a new customer than to keep an old one is obsolete. In a tough economy, it's at least 10 times more. Service good customers as if they were your first and only. Go way out to exceed their expectations. Just imagine that your competitors are knocking your customer's door. And by the way, they probably are. And now, number 4, increase your market research. If you lose a customer, find out why. If you win a customer, find out why. If you want a customer, find out what he or she really needs and provide it. Your mixture of asks and tells in the course of a day should be leaning towards questions. So don't be bashful. Ask them. Try to get the emotional level of people's buying motives. Break the rules and make the deal while your competitors try to figure out what happened. Ask, listen, and respond to the information you get. Number 5, focus on relationships. When times are good, people will act out of convenience. But when times are tough, you find out who really cares. Over the next year or so, the value of relationships to success in sales will increase. Your job is to strengthen as many relationships as you possibly can, and before it's too late. Be honest, be a good listener, be helpful, be there. Go the extra mile and stay in touch with people who change companies. They may be able to open a few new doors for you. Number 6, help others to succeed. This is an attitude you must have to succeed. What you give out will come back. If you try to sell anything just because it's a good deal for you, you'll be in trouble. Think of it this way. Friends don't sell things to their friends, but they do help them get what they want. And only your friends will tell you what they really want. Number 7, think big. The difficulty with this economy, it's only partly to do with money. It's really more a function of change. People's needs are changing. Business responds and changes. For every door that closes, another will open. For every relationship that ends, another can begin. If you focus on the negatives and constrict your thinking, you'll miss some great opportunities. In fact, fortunes will be made because of the tough economy. It always happens. So you just need to go make yours. So think big for your long-term goals, but be realistic with your short-term goals. This opens your mind to possibilities whilst bolstering your confidence. And finally, for number 8, keep positive. In over 50 years of experience in the sales and marketing arena, I'm certain of one big thing. In tough times, positivity wins. I'm Malcolm Gallagher. Thanks for watching. It's time now for our new feature, Vision On. With this episode, it's Vision on India. So, Hugh, we both have experience of dealing with business in India. I wouldn't say mine has been an enjoyable experience, and I don't think I'm alone in UK business in saying that. But as it celebrates 75 years of independence, is there opportunity there? What's your thinking?
I think India's a really interesting country, and it's fascinating that the government is saying that it's hoped to arrange a trade deal with India by the time of Diwali at the end of October. Well, that's not very long. Business leaders are warning the government not to rush too hard because India is a different country. And let's just go back to basics, if we wouldn't mind, for a moment. And that is that it's the fifth largest world economy. Once it was part of the empire. One of its main languages is English. They're used to British products. Their railways were built on British lines. There are loads of things that about India which are very, very British. I can remember my son going on a placement to the Bank of India to advise on how they can kickstart their SME economy. And his advice was interesting. And he said, well, for goodness sake, don't give money to intermediaries, which, of course, is exactly how the economy of India works. So if you want to export to India, very rarely will you actually find an end user that can buy from you. So you've got to use intermediaries, and that intermediary needs to make money. And therefore, the prices that are charged to the end user customer tend to be quite high, which puts British business at a disadvantage. Now, as I said, it's the world's fifth largest economy at $3 trillion. But what do you think we export to India as a country ourselves? Total, £6.5 billion. Now, that is a tiny fraction of their GDP. And looking at what we're exporting, it's really quite informative. We're exporting things like mineral fuels and oils, gems and metals, and that surprised me. A lot of electrical machinery. For example, Bollywood uses a lot of British-made broadcast products in their film sets. Cars, nuclear reactors, and boilers. Well, you're not going to get a nuclear reactor for probably less than $1 billion, are you? So the volume of exports to India is low, and therefore, of course, the opportunities are very high. But the opportunities are only high if you keep at it, because India does not like people who come and go. They want people they can really rely on. And also we have other advantages as well. The number of students, for example, coming over to our universities is very high. And as part of any trade deal, the Indian government wants to make sure that that's going to continue. And that tends to clash with the Home Office's view on visas and permits and all the rest of it. And how many Indian doctors and nurses are working in the NHS? Huge numbers. And that is hugely beneficial. And that, if you like, is probably the main export we're doing right now. Also, things like project management, we're doing quite well on things like that. But we also need to be very wary of some of the different ways that India does business. I mean, for example, Mackay's whiskey used to export a lot of whiskey to India. And then an Indian billionaire called Vijay Mallya decided he was going to buy Mackay's. So effectively, all the profits went into India's pocket rather than the Scottish company, which Mackay's was. So there are very different ways of doing business in India, which one needs to be very mindful of. There are profits to be made. For example, I can see an opportunity coming up in the next year or so, and that is that India's defense procurement almost entirely went to Russia. Now, that is going to pose a huge problem, not only in availability of things like ammunition and systems, but in terms of international pressure on India to move its purchasing away from Russia. And Britain could play a pretty vital role in that in terms of arms exports to India. But that's not for the SME, generally speaking. That is for the big boys. And they, of course, have to guard against things like, dare I say it, bribery. And in fact, there was a contract not so many years ago that ran into the sand over bribery allegations. So we have to be very careful. But India is used to England, it's used to Britain, it's used to speaking English. There are huge opportunities that if you are very persistent and I think also inventive, and one has to be, I think, willing to take on board things that you wouldn't take on board in terms of dealing with a domestic customer. So get to know, my advice would be get to know the products that you can export, get to know the country, and get to know the ways of doing business, without which you'll be lost.
Excellent. Yes. Yeah. They've had their challenges as well. Just as a final piece there, they were the most impacted by COVID. And one company I was dealing with in India that wanted to set up in the UK, after they got back to opening the factory after COVID, it had been overtaken by a colony of snakes, which took them nearly a month to get rid of. Well, their challenges our challenges are nothing compared to those sort of things. As always, no Brexit Business Show would be complete without our to-the-point Hugh's view. So what's your focus on this episode, Hugh?
Well, I felt that with the results of the Conservative leadership election coming up on the sides very quickly in the next 2 weeks, we ought just to have a look at the runners and riders. Well, of course, there are only two. But with only 2 weeks to go before the result of that leadership election, I thought it timely to see the sort of relationship the two contenders could expect to have with the EU. Liz Truss, as Foreign Secretary, is known in Brussels as a tough negotiator, and her tendency to resort to the nuclear option is not much liked. Her latest attempt to get access to the EU science programme is unlikely to bear fruit, unless she softens her position in relation to the Northern Ireland Protocol, which she says she's not going to do. That's going to be a really tough nut to crack, and that can only be resolved with dialogue and European cooperation. But to give you an example of Europe standing firm, any scientist who's been offered a grant under the main programs have been told they've got to relocate to an EU country to receive it. Now, that's caused huge upset, and that is probably why Liz Truss has embarked on this dispute program with the EU over the science programs. But it's not going to get anywhere whilst we still have this problem over the Northern Ireland Protocol. Both candidates have promised a bonfire of EU laws, but it's not sure what that means in practice. In some ministerial quarters, it's claimed that successful vaccine rollout would not have been so successful if we were still in the EU. Well, I don't quite know where that comes from. And most observers saying that, that's irrelevant. We would have done it anyway without being in or out of the EU. So surely what is required today, with a war in Ukraine, a cost of living crisis at home, rising energy prices across Europe, which we're all suffering from, and a once-in-a-century drought, don't forget that, across the continent, is having significant effects on movement of goods, the supply chain, the availability of goods, and the levels of investment that are available. So I would say that in a spirit of cooperation, it's important that political dogma doesn't trump pragmatic cooperation. And I think it'd be very interesting to see which of those candidates plump for pragmatic cooperation rather than political dogma.
Excellent. And pragmatic is a good word to finish on there. I'm looking forward to seeing the results. Perhaps, mind, we should be finishing our conversation and popping off for a cup of Indian tea. We trust you've enjoyed our new Brexit show format. There's a new episode every fortnight. Thanks for watching or listening, and do get in touch with us at mg@bizvision.co.uk if you would like us to cover any subject. Now, we're off to select our next Vision on Country. Bye for now.